evening. It is now 5:33. And is Superintendent Jones, is he okay, or is he's? Yeah. And he, okay, all right. All right.
I would like to call the Bank Education Workshop section to order at 5:34 p.m. Board members, I call your name, please say present for the records. Vice President McIntosh is absent. Trustee Gilbert. Present. Trustee Green, absent. Assistant Secretary Treasurer Del Moroni.
Present.
Secretary Booz.
Present.
Treasury McIntyre.
Present.
Myself, President McNeil, present. At this time, the board would now hear comments from the public. We ask that you state your name, the reason for addressing the board. Your remarks is 3 minutes on matters within authority of the board and not address individual by names. The presiding officer of the board shall have the right to limit the number of persons that wish to speak on the same subject. Please state your name and address first before beginning. Is there a Gennaro Lakes?
That would be Gennard Lakes?
Yeah, Gennaro. I think that's Janar.
Right.
Lakes.
Madam President, what time was it when we started?
5:34.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gennard Lakes. I'm a local pastor in the city. My address is 6027 Sipes Lane in Flint Township. I'm here today in behalf of GIN on Wilkins Elementary. I came before the board in our interest to do something in our community. I have a proposal with some of the plans that we have put together, some of the research that we did for the school, some of the problems that we identified in our neighborhood when it comes down to education, mental health, other areas, and I have a plan that I have here to present before the board for Wilkins Elementary School. So I'm here to find out what do we need to do to take the next step. I have programs that I'm working with right now. Currently, we have Carriagetown Ministries. Also, we work with Building Strong Women. We work with My Brother's Keeper. Also, we work with Teen Challenge. I've done the county jail. I've done GVRC. And I have letters of recommendation from GVRC and from Carriagetown Ministry. And so we're just here on behalf of our church. And also, I work with felons, and so those that are helping to find jobs to put them back into work is some of the things that we do. So I'm here to find out what is our next step when it comes down to purchasing Wilkins Elementary School. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? Yes, there's anyone else wishes to speak? Thank you. We will proceed to the agenda. At this time, I would like to turn the floor over to Attorney Gordon Van Wieren and the team from the Troom Law Firm.
Good evening. Gordon Van Wieren. I've been here before to meet with the board, and thank you for having us tonight. With me are two attorneys from our office, Mackenzie Flynn and Phil Clark. And if it is okay with the board, we have a packet of information we'd like to distribute to each board member.
Okay. We have someone that did it for you.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Before we get started on the talking about the various properties, my understanding from the last couple of times that we've been to the board meetings and met with the board is there are a couple fundamental things the board wants to make sure in terms of selling or disposing of property that are satisfied. One is to focus on community interest. And while revenue may be important for certain of the sales, the focus, our understanding is to give back to the community and to look at potential uses for these vacant properties that the community would benefit. The second focus, our understanding, is transparency, that everything that we do, everything that the board does will be an open session and will be open to the public. And toward that end, we have put together various documents in terms of the list of the various properties, both with and without buildings, that the district currently owns and may be considering for sale. Under tab 1 is simply a list of the vacant properties that we understand that the school district has, and again, that may or may not be for sale. And then under tab 2 is a summary of the buildings that are currently vacant that the school district has and the various records we've been able to obtain. Under tab 3 is a summary of the interested potential purchasers of the various buildings. Over the last several months, we've been contacted by numerous community groups, individuals and/or developers who are interested in certain specific properties, and some of the other parties are simply interested in any buildings that may be available. And that may vary depending upon the size of the building for certain of the user's needs. In terms of the tab 5, we have a very straightforward form for notice for bidding for the properties. At this point in time, if the board is interested in moving forward with soliciting bids, it would not be our recommendation that you retain a broker. A broker at this point, in our opinion, is not necessary. We've got the ability to get the information out both on the district's website as well as various social media. Generally, you bring a broker in when you're out looking for potential buyers. Here, we've been approached by buyers, so to me and the team, it doesn't make sense that the school district would pay a commission to a real estate broker where you've got interested parties. And so we developed, and again, this is for demonstration purposes only under tab 6. If the Board of Education were interested in soliciting bids for the Johnson Elementary School, this is a very straightforward form of a notice of bids and conditions. And basically, what we do is set a date and time when bids would be required, that there would be an amount set by the board that would be a refundable deposit, and it would be refunded to the bidders that are unsuccessful. If the board determines to move forward with a bidder, there'd be a purchase agreement, and the deposit would be held by the district and would be credited to the purchase price if the transaction occurred. We recommend that in this type of transaction with the school building that you agree to various dates for walkthrough of the buildings. If you don't do that, then the superintendent or Monica or someone else becomes a real estate broker, taking calls from the public, where we like to focus on dates and times specific that the building would be available for inspection. And so we do walkthroughs of the building with the various interested parties before the bids are due. And then it's very clear that when we transfer property, we transfer all liability to the buyer. Certain of these properties have environmental conditions that, under Michigan law, if an owner of property causes an environmental condition, they're liable. We can shift that through language in a purchase agreement. So we attempt to negotiate as part of the transfer of property that the environmental liability would go to the buyer, as part of any sale. We have the standard language in the form of bids where the Board of Education can accept or reject any and all bids, can negotiate with bidders. This is a little different process than some of the other requirements under Michigan law when you go out to bid for construction projects, where you have specific requirements that need to be satisfied in terms of advertising in a newspaper of general circulation on the state website and specific dates. Since Michigan law does not require that you solicit bids for the sale of your properties, and specifically here, none of the properties that we have looked at have any bonded debt, which makes it much more flexible to transfer a property. If there were bonded debt on a property, then there has to be an appraisal. There's a different process that you have to go through. Here, the board can be very flexible in terms of dealing with the sale or transfer of a property. So I probably spent too much time talking, but our thought is in terms of, I know the last time we were here, the board talked about a strategic plan in terms of moving the district forward in several different areas, and one was real estate. If there are certain properties that the board is confident that will not be used in the future for school purposes, we would recommend we put those out on the market. We solicit bids, and I think that would give us a jump start for moving forward with, some of the other properties, but at least it would give the board a chance to see how the process works. And critical here is that the Board of Education makes the final determination on the sale of any property. So even though there's a bid process, we're out soliciting bids, the bids come in, until the Board of Education approves a purchase agreement, no real estate transaction can move forward. So, we have the administration help, we have, we provide resources, but at the end of the day, the Board of Education must approve any proposed transaction or reject it. If the board doesn't feel it's in the best interest of the district, then the transaction doesn't happen. We simply present all of the facts to you, and then the board would make a decision as to each individual property. So whatever gets decided tonight or moving forward is simply allowing us to move forward and do our job, but it's not a final decision of the board till the board adopts a resolution and we move forward.
Is there any question from board members regarding what, yes, Chris?
So question number one is, are you folks real estate attorneys?
Yes. We have, this is my 40th year practicing law. I've practiced real estate my entire career. I do have my state of Michigan broker's license. I do not use that in transactions like this. I act as an attorney. Both Phil and Mackenzie also have several years of experience.
Okay. Have values been put on any of the properties?
We don't have specific values. I've worked with an appraiser to give me a range of value. Oftentimes, it's important to find out within a range what the value of a property is.
Sure.
In my opinion, that the cost of an individual appraisal for a building a school building would be somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000. To me, that's a tremendous expense that may or may not yield what you're looking for. So my suggestion would be that we look at a range of value. If the board's interested in moving forward, there would be a flexible range, but to have individual appraisals, I don't think would benefit the district at this point in time.
Okay. I can appreciate your comment about not hiring a real estate agent to save on the commission. But these properties, they're known right now that the district wants to sell them. And we only have what I see as one bidder for each property. In hiring a real estate agent, do you think it might be possible that more people will come to the table, possibly increasing the demand and the price we ultimately get?
Yeah, that's it's certainly a possibility. What we see oftentimes is if we put in the bid specifications that if a broker brings a client forward, we will pay a commission. So
Sure.
it's called a one-party listing, where you don't give an exclusive listing to a certain real estate agent, but you fan it out to the community. And if there is a broker out there that has a client, the broker can come forward and be paid a commission for that particular client, and it's only if the transaction closes. And that's how real estate works, that the realtor or the broker doesn't get paid unless a property transaction closes.
Okay. That's all I have right now.
Is there any more question from the board?
Madam President.
Yes, Trustee Gibbert.
Thank you, Madam President. I just had one question, Lawyer Van Weren. Is like each property or each school board property they have, it's sort of valued on its own? Because I heard you say that the bids could be flexible or the amount could be flexible. So is it a recommendation, you would give a recommendation to the board as to what you felt would be the starting point? Perhaps, of course, you want to get as much as you can, but the minimum amount, I guess, is what I'm saying. But say, for instance, if it was ALA, and ALA may start at a minimum, maybe a little bit higher than some other schools somewhere else. Is that correct?
Yes, and when I say range of value, rather than doing an individual appraisal of each school building or each property, we would take a per square foot value of across the board of the properties. And certainly it makes sense in some situations to set a minimum price. If what that does is it gets that out to the public that if they're interested, that's the floor, that's the minimum amount that the board would be willing to sell the property for. Now, in certain of these properties, I know there's some community groups that are interested, and I don't know how setting a minimum may or may not work with a community group that you want to work with, because under Michigan law, you don't have to take the high bid on a property.
That's right.
Because there's no bonded debt. If there was bonded debt, then you would be required to take the high bid. But in this situation, you can look at a number of factors, and those factors can include what type of use will the property be put to, what type of benefit does it provide to the community as a whole, to an individual neighborhood, or, really there are a lot of different factors that can be considered. There are certain parts of property that we may have a group that wants to develop a playground or something like that benefits an individual area. Those all go into the mix, and for the board to determine what's in the best interest of the district in terms of whether or not to transfer the property.
I want to mention something. Last time you was here, we had the conversation of leasing the land, maybe selling the property or then leasing the land because we want to hold on to much of the land and lease the land so you can get a building. However, we're looking at, because we know your building is not that much anything, but we was looking at leasing the land. We had some conversation about that. Could you update us on that?
Sure. We can put the RFP that we could put out would include the sale or lease, and I think the last time that I was here, we talked about vacant land. So if you've got a building on a piece of property that's 20 acres and the building itself only takes 5 acres, then the remaining 15 acres could be transferred for another purpose and could be leased on a long-term basis or short-term. Like I say, because the board has such great flexibility here, we can look at any option that's being proposed by either a potential buyer or someone who would want to lease a building and or the property.
Is Chris? I meant Linda Booth, she never spoken yet.
Question. The environment, you had said something about it goes along with the bidder, the environmental. So can you explain that to me?
Sure. In terms of Michigan law, we have what's called a Polluters Pay Act, and what that means is that if you own property or you lease property and you cause contamination to be on the property, you're liable for it. And probably the best example is if there was a gas station on a corner that was owned by Shell gas station 50 years ago, and the building was sold for a flower shop or a coffee shop or something like that and hasn't been used for a gas station for 50 years, Shell Oil is still responsible for that property. There's no statute of limitations. Oftentimes you hear about a 3 or a 5 or a 10-year statute of limitations. Under Michigan law, the person or the company that caused that pollution is liable for it. You can transfer that liability in negotiating with a buyer or someone who's going to lease the property that they would become liable for it. So what would happen, even though the state of Michigan, if the district, for example, caused an environmental contamination, the state of Michigan would still look to the district, but by contract, we can transfer that liability to the buyer. It's all part of negotiating, and it goes into, in part, what someone's willing to pay for property. If it's got contamination, then they're not going to pay as much for the property because they know they're assuming a liability. Now, under Michigan law, in the last few years, it's become much easier to develop contaminated property. If a buyer is able to identify the contamination, then the buyer can say to the state and file the necessary documents that we didn't cause this contamination, but what we're proposing is that the buyer would still be responsible. So at the end of the day, you can negotiate who's going to be liable moving forward for contamination on property.
Sounds good.
Do you
Yes, go
think
ahead.
any of these properties are contaminated, have any environmental contaminations? Other than probably lead pipes or something, maybe, I don't know.
Excellent question. Given the vintage of many of these buildings, I would have to believe that they have, and the federal government requires you file reports on asbestos. So the buildings that were constructed, before the late 70s, in all likelihood have some asbestos. Constructed before 1978, lead-based paint. You could have, lead pipes, you could have transformers, or a lot of different things that school districts over the years have that were used in the ordinary course of of business that have now been discovered to contain contaminants. So we make no representations when a school enters into a purchase agreement as to the condition of the property. That's all left to the buyer to do their due diligence inspections and determine, you know, if there's contamination on the property, and if there is, do they still want to move forward with the transaction?
Is there any more questions? Yes, and then I'll let you guys continue. Go ahead.
So we've heard about the appraisal, but what about a simple market analysis? Will you folks be doing anything like that?
Yeah, in fact, we were talking in the car on the way over here. The market analysis is something that a local real estate agent under Michigan law is authorized to do. It's not an appraisal, but it gives you a general valuation. If you have a contact person, we'd be interested in working with a realtor in the local area that might be able to give us, you know, a market analysis.
Okay. So no level 1 or level 2 environmental studies have been done on our properties at this point? Okay.
No.
And so as I don't know that, and maybe someone on the board knows this, but I don't believe we've actually determined yet location and what properties to keep open at the end of the day.
Point of information.
Yeah.
The schools that you have here, these are the schools that we know that we are going to have on the list to get rid of. And as they are, they're buying them as they are. We're not doing nothing extra. So the list that you have, these are all the schools, and we kept off the one that was not.
Okay. Where I was going with the question is, we might be, I'm thinking there could be a possibility that we sell one school, and maybe we'll need to use one of our empty lots for a new school. And I think we should just possibly keep that in mind, but that's all. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, you want to continue?
Yeah, and
Anybody
again,
else
we
want-
would recommend if the board has determined that there are a few of the properties and buildings that are not part of your future, that we be engaged to look at valuation and get something out in terms of bid documents so we can see what interest there is and generate that interest and bring it back to the board.
I wasn't going to necessarily ask a question, but just to say that we, as a community, understand that there have been several hidden master plans around the community and agendas, and that this is part of the process of opening up this the school board and the community agenda to make it community-oriented and democratic and open to the public so that there aren't any of those backdoor deals that have been happening for decades. And so I think, at least from my position, I'm operating with the understanding that this is a new day, that this is a new agenda, that we have a portfolio for the Flint Public Schools. It is fantastic to hear that we have property with unbonded debt, that we have more autonomy and self-determination with our school district and our properties, and that we are looking at the properties, the district as a whole. We have a new strategic plan. It's focused on very specific things, and while we may be working with community partners, they are just that. They are partners. This is the Flint Community School District, and we're operating in the best interests of our scholars and our teachers and our parents and our community. And so, while there has been talk in the past about different properties, different buildings, different facilities, and there have been several rumors and speculations. What you're getting now is what you see here, and it's all out in the open. And so we're trying to determine the best course for ourselves, for Flint. I think that, I don't want to speak for the board, I can't speak for the board, but it's not that it's up for grabs, it's not that this is the Wild West, that this is a land grab, but this is a calculated and very informed decision-making process from the board and the community to do what's best and what's right, and to maybe to right some of the wrongs that have been done for decades to ourselves in our district. So with that being said, we are going to be looking at all options, all combinations. If one property or one building is sold or is going to be used by a particular community group, that might change the conditions or the use of perhaps another building or some other area of land that we hold. But make no mistake that this isn't about distributing our resources to stakeholders or to interests who have had their fingers in the pie for decades. This is about reclaiming what is ours in the city. Thank you.
And I would go back to when I started. Before we were hired, we were told two things: transparency, number one, and number two, community interest, which is refreshing. We're talking about those two things. We're meeting in open session, which I'm very, very glad we're doing that. Oftentimes, boards will meet in closed session. Meeting in open session opens everything up, and everything's on the table. So thank you, Laura, for your comments.
I just want to mention, when we talk about community, I did, somebody from your firm, I can't think who it was, did the community partnership agreement.
Ms. McKenzie, yes.
I would like for her to explain that as well, because what we want to do when we're talking about community partnership, like a school like Wickerson, and I think that a community partnership agreement could go along with what we've been talking about. We've been talking about Wickerson for a while. The gentleman has been coming in our last year in our board meeting. We was talking more about community involvement. So I would like for you to take that time to present and explain it to the board and everybody what that community partnership agreement looks like.
Yeah, definitely. And I can also email Monica a copy of the agreement so that she can circulate it
Yeah,
to
you
you
probably
all
need
as
to
well.
kind of pull the mic, take it off,
Hello,
and put it
cloak.
in your.
Yeah,
close
this
to you.
mousy voice doesn't
Okay.
project well. So yes, we talked about doing a community partnership agreement. Essentially, from my understanding, you wanted to work with different community groups who offer after-school programs and various different programs for students. I believe ones you mentioned were tutoring, entrepreneurship, and things like creating solar lights. So I have a letter that I had sent you, and I believe Superintendent Jones as well. It
Yes.
is our opinion that the board does have the authority to enter into this type of agreement or partnership. Under the revised school code, the board has been allowed to do so in different ways. This is a function related to instructing students and pupils as well as the community, so we definitely think this is something that is allowed. With that, you also had indicated that you would be interested in using ESSER funds, correct?
Yes,
So yeah, that's still on the table. In looking at different ESSER guidance under the ARP ESSER, which is known as ESSER 3, the more recent one, it does indicate that this has been allowed in different instances, programs that are seeking to improve students' academic performance, especially after COVID. So things like this, community groups partnering for tutoring, entrepreneurship would definitely be a permissible use of ESSER funds as well. So with that, we think it definitely is permitted under the revised school code for the board to do, and ESSER funds would likely be permitted to be used. As I think I indicated to you, we do need to consider the amount, whether we need to do any sort of bidding. And then with the agreement that I had attached, essentially, we made it a form agreement, so it's very basic. What you can do is you can modify it depending on each community group you discuss with. It's my understanding that they would need to come in front of the board and essentially pitch their idea before being approved. And then whenever you're interested, we have this very basic form agreement. It discusses your authority to enter into this agreement. And then we would have kind of an Exhibit A, which would more specifically discuss each group and what they would be offering. So like I said, I will definitely send this out and so it can be circulated. I apologize for not having that for you this
No,
evening.
each board has a copy,
Oh.
because you send it, and we,
Oh,
Ms. Monica
perfect.
make sure that we had a printed copy. It was a yellow package she gave us at the last board meeting that she gave each board member.
So do you have any questions
Do anyone have
upon
questions?
first glance? Yeah.
In those programs that you listed, my understanding is that they have to be evidence-based to be ESSER funded. Did you explore that as a requirement, or is that not your understanding?
So we had not discussed in depth the exact community groups that you'd be working with yet, so I did have a few questions that I left open for us to discuss, but let me pull up my discussion of it. Under the ARP ESSER guidance, there are different scenarios where they've allowed for students' outcomes that are systematically supporting their academic and non-academic needs with a whole child approach and things like that. So we would want to delve into that a little further before entering into the specific agreements, but definitely something like evidence-based learning would be very important to consider.
Thank you. Chris Demeron.
I think one last question. Can we talk about deed restrictions? Are we allowed to put a restriction on the deed so that whoever buys these properties, whether it be vacant, an operating building, or an operating building that's just been shuttered, a restriction that would prevent the buyer from putting in a school in the building?
Yeah, and the answer to that is no. There's a Michigan law that's very specific that has both civil and criminal penalties if you put some type of deed restriction in. So when I talk about flexibility, the board has great flexibility. That is the only restriction that is prohibited by law. You can certainly require a buyer, once they purchase property, to use it, that they don't leave it vacant. You come up with a timetable for their use, but it would be prohibited under law to restrict that use for an education purpose. And the revised school code had that language for many years, and it talked about public education. But now the law is even broader, that talks about any type of education. So that's always a risk or a concern when you sell property, but unfortunately, there's nothing under law that we can do that would restrict that. And if we tried to do that, then like I said, there are potential civil and criminal penalties for doing that.
Thank you.
Okay. Going forward with the, anyone have any more questions? You have any? Going forward with the agenda, we know that we have to identify the vacant properties, and most of them that is in this book that we have identified, been waiting on for about a year. Then we have to determine the to-do and timeline, but saying all of that, I just go back to community. We had mentioned, for instance, if a person come in and they see a school they want, what's that process look like from the board perspective, from your perspective? So we might want to do a hardship or do some type of in-kind, if that's the right word. What would that process look like?
In terms of the actual bidding, we would, prepare the notice, and we would amend the notice to require that any bidder submit certain information as to the proposed use, and the various obligations and what they're proposing to use the property for, number of benefited students, number of benefited community members, et cetera. And then when the bids came in, we would do a summary, and we would request that the bidders that the board's interested in talking to come to the board and make a presentation, because it's critical that you know who you're dealing with. One item that comes up often is a critical issue is funding. It's great to have ideas, community-based, but at the end of the day, you need funds to be able to do that. And that's something that the board, in our opinion, needs to consider, because there's nothing worse than selling property and having it not developed. So if as part of the plan, the board would want to see financing, sources of financing, and I know that there are different groups that have financing in place. There's the Mott Foundation that provides funding. There are various other charities and benevolent associations that could be reached, but when you move forward, you want a package that there's a great likelihood of success, and quite frankly, what goes along with that is having the money to do what you're proposing to do to benefit the community.
Looking at your, in your folder, item number 3, you list the number of people that was potential buyers, and I see we done add a few more since we have. Our number 8 is off the list.
Right, our understanding, and this was just a summary of the contacts that have been made, to us. So our understanding was that neither of the high schools were available, but since we were contacted, we put that information in, and our recommendation would be to go back to this group and say, here are the other sites that are available. What can we do to work, within your parameters to make the sites that are available something you'd be interested in?
Saying all what we have said, so our next step to proceed on, what is the next step that the board need to do just to keep everything rolling? We know that we have a list of people that wanted some property. We got people here that was interested in some property, and I don't know if they're on this list or not. So we need to find out how to proceed from here.
And our recommendation would be for the board, apparently there's been a determination as part of the strategic plan of what buildings and what properties are not going to be needed. We would like to work with on those properties, contact the interested potential buyers, but then fan it out both on your website and social media to get as many bidders interested. If the board, and a good point was brought up about brokers. Generally, real estate brokers, they will bring a party to the table if there's a commission paid. And like I say, a one-party listing, we could offer, for example, 3% for a broker who brings a potential buyer forward. And we fan it out to the various real estate agencies and groups in the Genesee County area and in Southeast Michigan to see if we can generate interest.
One of the concerns that we do have, and we probably have to, get with the superintendent and assistant superintendent. I know we had conversations by doing a grant and building new schools. And did you know, I know we was looking at Central High School, the property over here, and what possibly 2 or 3 more elementary, that's in the plan? So then we would have to make a decision where those new schools would be before we could really finalize a lot of stuff here. Am I correct?
I don't want to misspeak,
Yeah,
so I
'cause the
apologize, but
superintendent's
I
right
thought that the board was in agreement that these properties listed in this packet was not a part of the future of the district.
Not a part of what?
I'm sorry. and again, I'm just
Yeah, you just
asking
asking,
a question. I thought that these properties listed in this packet here, that the board was of the consensus that these were not a part of the future of the district. That if there are new schools built, that they would be done on properties other than the ones listed here.
So wouldn't we have to identify those properties since we already own them? We don't want to get rid of property, we own the property, and then going out buying land to build a school. That's what I was concerned about. We wanted to make sure this is something that the board have to work with. And it states in our policy that we do have to work with the superintendent and the administration to determine that if we are talking about building 2 or 3 new schools, where these new schools is gonna be before we talked about getting rid of our property. And we had not made that decision based on the grant. We know that we're gonna use Central.
Okay.
So we know that we took Central off the list. Now, where are we gonna put these, 2 or 3? We know Northwestern was to be looked at, or get a feasibility study, what it would cost to bring Northwestern to Cole and making that the middle school. However, there's no decision what we said about the elementary schools. Am I correct on that? And so that's where we probably at, but that would not hinder us from kind of going forth to some of this property that we have. It's just get an idea, where do we kind of like to have these new schools at? Because when you start talking about closing schools, you also got to start about building elementary schools. So that's something that we have to work in our time frame. And given this saying all of that, I just wanted to give an example. Suppose we're looking at McKenzie, and the board agreed that McKenzie could be used as a community type of project. And then we can kind of start looking at that point. If that person comes in, do they bring you the proposal, and then you work with the board, or how does that work?
We're happy to summarize proposals and bring them to the board. It's critical that the person making a proposal be at the board meeting to explain and answer questions. The next step, if the board wants to move forward with a particular group, is a purchase agreement that we would draft. And again, nothing is final till the Board of Education takes action to approve the purchase agreement. So if the board determines that they want to move forward with a certain community group or buyer, then we would work with that buyer to develop a purchase agreement, agree to it, and bring it back to the board for approval.
So with the board, are we all thinking and working collectively here? I'm thinking that we probably would need some type of meeting of the mind workshop to gather more information. A couple of them we know that are some of the people have been waiting a very long time. And we had already kind of in our last year or something, had kind of identified a couple of these people that's on this list. And so my thinking is that we need to sit down and have a meeting of the mind, where we're going and how we're going to get there with these properties. You can just comment. Yeah, go ahead.
So I thought that that the possibility of leasing, we discussed that, was open. And right now, we're just talking about buying and having a purchase agreement.
I think we're talking about both.
Okay, so especially when we're talking about community groups and the relationship to funding and having some kind of a funding proposal, what about the possibility of having like a long-term leasing agreement with groups, with the community benefits agreement? And I know that it's not that, I wasn't saying that we weren't talking about that, but we seem to be just constantly focusing on selling and dumping property. But what about like a joint stewardship, especially for groups who don't necessarily have an enormous portfolio? They have a great idea and they can work with the community to utilize the space, but we don't necessarily just give away our assets and our resources, but we work to steward and foster the building of that space to make it even more valuable for the community, like mutually beneficial for the community, for the school district, and that way we don't just give away our resources and we end up with nothing.
Yeah, and in terms of any RFP, we will make it both a proposed purchase and lease and long-term. So it'll be very broad, and that's an excellent point, because I keep talking about the sale of property, but when I say sale, I incorporate leasing. So we will, in terms of any notice of bids, we will be looking for proposals that include both the purchase, short-term and long-term leasing, and if the board does have the authority to do cooperative agreements too, with community groups. And so that's something, and so I think the broader we keep the notice that the community groups and other potential buyers and users can come in with proposals. We're not saying that, it's got to be a proposal to buy the property and give us the purchase price, but we open it up so we can be flexible in terms of selling, leasing, entering into cooperative relations or agreements.
So we could also do a lease with an option to buy.
Sure, that's all. It's something the board has the authority to do, and oftentimes that works. So you kind of, you walk before you run to make sure that in the person leasing or the group makes sure that, it makes sense to move forward long-term, and there's kind of a process you go through. I do think if we can, I don't know if it's going to require another workshop, but if we can figure out what buildings and properties are not part of your future, and you come to agreement that, and you may want to list 3 categories. These properties are definitely part of our future. The second category, these properties may be part of our future, and the third category is these properties are not part of our future. We want to do whatever we can do to, work with the community and get them back in use and provide benefit to both the community and students within the community. So, that type of, and then we can work on the third, that the properties that are not part of either your short-term or your long-term goals, and then we can get those out, get them on the street and look for proposals. When I say proposals, to purchase, to lease, to enter into relationships. And again, flexibility is a key here, because the board, this is one of the areas of law that the board does have great flexibility to work with, potential users. And I'm going to take the word buyer away and just say users. Let's focus on who may be able to use the properties.
So we talked about sales earlier. With the lease, can we force them not to use it as a school? So there's
No.
no sale, there's just a lease.
Yeah.
That's a no.
Same restriction. So the law is very broad in terms of sale, lease, use.
Okay.
And we, unfortunately, the law is very clear and we don't have that option. So whatever use the property may be put to, either under a sale, lease, cooperative arrangement, we cannot restrict it for a education use.
And excuse me, maybe on this list of the list of 10 there, maybe we could go through each number and say whether the school is open or not. I know some of them are closed, some are open.
They're close on the list.
They're all closed.
These are abandoned, vacant buildings that's
Okay.
been around for a while. Yes.
So, if I may, it sounds like our next step, especially because we just passed the working strategic plan, would be to have a meeting where we have a strategic plan meeting to move forward with more concrete steps now that we've met with the state superintendent, we've voted on the strategic plan, and now that Mr. Van Buren has specifically said that given us a charge to figure out maybe 3 categories, I think that's very instructive, that we actually do that. So we have a
Okay.
meeting where we determine what buildings are not part of the shorter, long-term goals, and that we create 3 categories of, yes, we are going to keep these properties and use them, maybe, and then no. And that would be what you recommend doing
Yeah.
first, and then we move forward with a meeting where and now that we have an announcement, I mean, we could make it very clear to the public that we have a variety of options, not just the sale of buildings, but leasing. And then maybe you could say more about the cooperative relation agreements, or I'll have to do more research to look more specifically on that. That would
Yes,
be,
there's a provision in the revised school code that authorizes a school district to enter into cooperative arrangements with public and private entities to further the educational purposes of the school district. So we've worked on transactions all around the state of Michigan. We represent in excess of 500 school districts in Michigan, and from time to we have school districts that come to us. They have private sector clients, companies that want to, do creative learning and provide activities that benefit the functions of the school district. We have counties, we have townships, cities that enter into joint agreements, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of cooperative arrangements. And I wanted to mention, in terms of the workshop, to determine what properties that the district definitely will not be using in the future, I would recommend the board also look at properties where the building is not part of the district's future, but the land may be. The example where you've got 20 acres and you can split off a building in 5 acres, but you want to keep the excess land to have the option to build a building, or because a real good point was brought up. Once you sell property, it's very difficult oftentimes to find replacement property. So that's where the thought really needs to come in the analysis, in terms of before you sell property, if there's excess land, do you want to sell that land with it? Or do you want to, keep all or part of the vacant land?
Go ahead.
so it was my understanding from previous conversations, and this could be changing in the future, but I remember having meetings where we expressed explicitly that we were not interested in selling the land.
In most places, for instance, you look at McKinley. McKinley sits on about 22 acres of land, and that's a lot of land. So those type of places sits on 22 and 28 acres of land. We're not looking at selling McKenzie for $50,000 or $60,000, and they get 20 acres of land. So we're looking at, well, hey, we can partial that land out if you get so much of it, but then we remain that land and use it for other uses.
So I think, we'll definitely have to have a workshop, but I think
Yes.
that's, in all
That's the next
cases,
step.
the building will be separated from the land. Just because you're interested in a building per se, doesn't mean that you get acreage, all this acreage along. And I think that's part of what's driving maybe some of these ill intent, some of these bids that are going on. So I think that needs to be made clear. Like I said, this is not a land grab. So I think that
Yeah.
we're very, we're going to be separating all of those things. And if you're talking about getting 20 acres of land, then you know, that will definitely
Yeah.
beat market price for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not all the property, because some of the school, one of the school had just enough for parking. Like you take a building like this, only thing you have is the parking space and a little few land that, so you won't be looking at grabbing the land for a space like that. But when you're looking at a school that sits on 28 and 30 acres of land, then we're talking about something like that. But a school like this has very little parking space, they need this space for themselves. And I guess that's where we're going to our next step. He done gave us the part of the board action of how to proceed, so he gave us instruction how to proceed. And the next step would be, we have to take an action, I believe. And I don't know if we're really prepared to make this action, what buildings we are going to sell. I don't know if we're really prepared to do all of this yet. I think we could have this information, some of it we know, and then some of it we don't. But I don't want to make a decision, got new board members, and they need to get caught up, and it wouldn't be fair, okay, for us to make a decision as a whole. Pastor Gibbert.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree with some of what you said. One of the things that I think is critical is that the building that we have a list as well with, like we have here, because this is a good list. But somewhere we can look and see how much acreage is there.
Yeah, it's right here. On
Is it in here too?
Yeah.
Which
So if you go to,
I've been looking for it.
yeah,
Maybe I
if
just-
we go to, let's go to McKinsley. If you look at McKinsley, the front page, go to your,
Page one?
McKinsley, the school called McKinsley.
Oh, you're talking about this? Is
Yeah.
this?
Is this McKinley? Yeah, okay, McKinley. If you look at,
McKinley, oh.
yeah, if you look at McKinley,
Okay.
have you gotten to
Okay,
it?
I got McKinley. Okay, I got it.
Look at down at the bottom, it talks about the zoning code, and they talk about total acre.
Okay, I got you. Okay, thank you. Okay.
You see it, Chris? McKinley School.
You have to look through the.
Yeah.
You have to look through the notebook to the,
And that's something the board, I go through there and I look at each of the specs on each school, and I look for
Brother
that
Chris.
acre.
that's not, yeah, you got to get the book.
It's in the book.
That's in the binder, I believe.
Yeah, thank you,
I guess I'm
Lawyer
not
Clark.
seeing- I'm not seeing zoning
Yeah.
on here. Oh, okay. That's more than the first page. Got it. Okay.
So the other thing too, Lawyer Van Weren, say for instance, some other school that's just got maybe 2 acres.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, something like this. So you would probably just sell the school and, I mean, and with whatever few acres you got with it, parking lot or whatever.
3 acres and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I
like
would
that.
think that, that would go along with the building. When you're talking about 3 and 4 acre, usually it goes along with the building.
Right, correct.
And I'll point out one thing, in terms of if we're splitting property off, then we have to go through the city of Flint to do a land division, and we have to comply with their ordinances. So
Yes.
there's something to keep in mind. And generally, when you look at splitting off property, you have to provide access to the property you're splitting off. Sometimes there are frontage requirements on a street. There's dimension requirements where you can't have more than say 1 wide to 4 long. You can't have what we call a bowling alley lot that's 10 times longer than the width. And so that's something to keep in mind. And on each transaction, we would have to go to the city and just, we don't have to have a meeting, but we get with the assessor and show them a map and say, this is what we're proposing to do. Before you do the survey, before you spend any money on it, to make sure that the city says, yes, that's a land division that can be approved, because you don't want to get down the road on a transaction only to find out the city.
Can't divide it up.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So it sounds like that's something that we need to do immediately.
Yes, that's right.
Because,
I agree.
and I think we need to take action in some way immediately to indicate our intent not to sell the land with the building, and to make it explicit and very clear. So we need to have some kind of a separation.
So could we look at, say, in July, coming back after the holidays, the board get together and have a quick workshop?
We need to do that immediately, and then you're saying that we need to meet with the city to have that done, to even see if there's a possibility. The city is going to have to allow this?
Yeah, it's only,
Yeah, under Michigan law, you're taking one lot and you're creating two lots. And so, and it's a preliminary decision by the city, so it's simply emailing a copy of the diagram of the land where the building is and just showing where it would be split off and seeing if that would comply. So it's not a situation where you get a formal decision, you get a tentative or preliminary decision that yes, you can move forward. And so we can do that quickly. It's not an involved process.
Okay, but we do need to do it.
but not next week. We can't do it till after July, 1st of July.
Correct, but I mean, as soon as possible after that, though. I mean, I don't want to keep
Madam-
putting this off, yeah.
Point of information. Madam President, if you could you speak up a little bit? So
I didn't want that. She was just, I was just correcting her. We should do
Okay,
it in the,
okay.
sometime in July, if we could get agreement after the 4th of July weekend, because we got board meetings this week. Next week is, people are leaving, going out of town. So I really appreciate the information that Troon brought forth, and I hope you're going to be side by side us in this process. And as we make the decision, each one of we'll probably be sending them to you. We don't have to wait till we get the whole batch, sending it to you as well as getting the board approval to adopt the community partnership agreement. That is going to be part of the board would like to see that. That's what the agreement that we're doing these community forums and letting the community know that we're in agreement with working with them. And so that's something that we are here ready for you, hopefully then. Chris Demaroni, did you have something?
Yes, thank you. So, I don't mind keeping land on a large parcel and just sell off the real estate or lease it, whatever, the building. My concern is twofold. One is if we don't have a use for it, and if we can get fair market value for that excess land, I don't have a problem selling it all. We're not going to give it to them for 10 cents on the dollar, but, so I don't have a problem with that. The other thing, we're talking about going to the city assessor's office and say, hey, can we split this and that and the other? I'm thinking the assessor's office might charge us for that, because it'll be somewhat time-consuming. But even if they didn't, what we're thinking of, say, keep these extra 10 acres, well, the buyer might say, I want the building, but I need 2 more of those acres. So we're going to be back then to see if there's enough driveway and egress and everything else. So, we might be going back to the assessors 2, 3, 4 times. I think something general to find out what the zoning and what the current uses could be would help. But when we don't know the specifics, that could be problematic.
Yeah, we can generally tell when we look at a land division and we look at the city code of ordinances, whether it's going to comply. But basically, we're asking the assessor to bless it. And if we see a parcel that is proposed to be split that doesn't have access or doesn't have, is configured irregularly, then that creates issues. So, we can tell most of the time whether or not we think the assessor, will say, yes, this is something that would be approved. Now, depending upon the zoning of a particular property, you may have a minimum number of acres that you have to transfer with it. But generally, most of the property being residential or within that zoning classification, a minimum acreage usually isn't an issue.
So the law firm would kind of do a preliminary assess even before it got to the assessors. So you would know just about how they would go about as to say what it was or what division it was. You would have an idea one way or the other. Because you said that they would more or less just bless it, because I guess that's the practice of the way they kind of do it in the assessor's office, when they dividing the land, if they separating it.
Yeah, what we do is take a sketch of the property, and we go to the assessor and say, we have reviewed your ordinance, and we believe this complies, we want you to confirm it. Yeah.
So the other thing, because myself and Brother Chris, we were on the assessor board, the board of review for the city of Flint. Brother Chris was on there for several years, and I was on there for about 7 or 8 years. And so we kind of know things can kind of get kind of murky. So when you said that, that was a good observation, that being the Board of Education property, in a transaction going forward, we would think that the city assessor's office would, as you said, bless it. I like your word. I'm going to keep that in mind when we have to deal with them.
This list that we have right here, when the last time it been updated? Is the same people are inquiring about this property, or is just from previous? Nothing been added?
It's, I don't believe the group, Mackenzie, that spoke tonight, are they part of?
No, they're not on the
Yeah.
list yet, but we can add them, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we need to go back through this. I remember because some people waited so long. Then I see some people down here just want large buildings. We don't know what they mean about that. Because I would have said we could have went on with the list that we had here, but we done added a couple of new things to it. Item number 3, we don't know who they are. I know there's conversation about Johnson Elementary. And number 6, so some of these things we got to look at. My suggestion is, I know that we have a motion on the floor for us to approve some of these property, but I don't think we can make that motion yet until we come together as a board as a whole. It was gonna be a motion, right? But we might not can make that motion because we're not in agreement. So we'll skip the motion part of it because you gave us a lot of homework to do. Go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, which part of the workshop are we on? Because we have the determination of to-dos and timelines, but I guess I'm unclear about the timeline.
We have to discuss that.
Okay, so,
And he gave the board on action of how to proceed. He told us how to proceed, breaking down in groups and getting that information, determine which buildings we're going to keep. So that's the part, action number 3, we did that. And determined to do the same thing as 2 and 3. So it's a lot of work that the board have to do since we gotten this, and determine the timeline, how we're gonna get this done.
right, so so we're still on 2 and 3?
I believe that we are done with 2 and 3.
Well, then what's the timeline?
That's something the board would have to make that decision. It's something.
Is it when we initiate the bids out and the other process?
No, the timeline, we want to back up. We want to talk about the properties that you definitely want to keep. The category of properties you may want to keep. And then the third category is the properties you definitely they're never going to be part of the district's future. And they can be, and we will update the list of potential buyers and users. But once those properties are classified, and then we determine, the excess land, we can do that. We can work on that.
Okay.
But what's critical is for the board, next steps, figure out what properties are in each of the categories. And then we will, in terms of properties that are in the third category that you're never going to use, never going to be part of short or long-term purposes of the school district, we would like to move forward on those and get those on the street so we're excited. We want to move on this, but we need to back up and make sure we know that the board, it is reviewed and has categorized the properties.
I'm just wondering so I guess maybe I'm not using the word timeline the same. I just wondered are we talking about years? I mean, I know we're not talking about years. So like what is, I thought we might have a more of a working timeline.
I would recommend, I know that 4th of July is coming up, but I would recommend in July that the board try to categorize the properties so we can move forward. I'm not looking out a year or 6 months. I'm looking at.
Right, immediate.
Let's move on these. If we know that.
Yeah, and I do want us to move immediately. We do have one board member that absent, and I just like to do everything with everybody at the table. I'm not comfortable with one board member not being here because we started on this all together, and I kind of want everybody. So hopefully we can schedule something in July, and giving that board member time enough, and then and get them a good time where it won't maybe just we'll figure out that time how we would do that. And get those questions answered. That would be the best fair thing.
Madam President, I'm with Lawyer Van Weren. I think we got a good setup here that they have brought to us and done a wonderful job, I might add, and helped me to kind of understand how this is supposed to work or the way we want it to work. But the to-dos and the timelines and the dates and things, it seems to me we can act on that today. That's all.
Like give us a date when we want to.
Yeah, the first week after the 4th of July, or,
Yeah.
because you're
Okay.
right, people going to be going all over everywhere. But, while they're off, they say, well, I got to get back home so I can get to that meeting about that property, Because if you
So-
do that, then it'll be on the website, and then, as he said, it's not going to be out 6 months or a year. We're going to get moving because we got our strategic plan, and we kind of.
So Trustee Gilbert, can we look at our calendar for the month of July, and so they can the attorneys can put something in their calendar if that's fair for everybody.
I was just,
Call on the 13th and a regular board meeting on the 20th.
Of July?
Yes.
So we need to have something before the 13th, the first week in July. Could we do something as a board?
Yeah.
The first week in July, 4th, 5th,
maybe
the
July.
4th is on a Monday, Tuesday. What about 7, 6?
Right, what about July the 6th, is that, or the 7th or something? I don't know about Fridays, you don't mess with people's Fridays, they're ready to go home to their families.
7, 6, or 7, 7. Could,
The 6th?
yeah, could we look at,
The 6th,
you'd be going on the 6th and the 7th?
6 is bad for me.
Okay.
maybe the 7th?
Well, actually, that whole week is bad for me,
Okay.
that first week.
What did Brother Chris say?
Fourth.
What about Monday, the 11th? Without superintendent being here?
Right, that's what I was concerned about. What about Monday, the 11th?
That would work for us. We'll make ourselves,
Oh,
and
okay.
if
Can
one
we
or
all
more
agree
of
to
us.
7-11?
Will that
The
work for-
attorney- Yeah,
Yeah, will that work for the attorney firm
Yeah.
and superintendent? Will that
yeah.
work for him?
I
Okay,
don't have him
okay,
absent at
okay.
that time.
That's good, that sounds good.
I'll get back on the 11th.
You'll be back when?
The 11th? I won't be here on the 11th.
You won't?
12?
she won't.
We're gonna have to have at least 4 people here on the 11th.
And if, you know, if you have to
Brother
do it
Chris had
without
a
me,
comment.
that's fine.
Chris,
Yeah, no, if we're still deciding the date, I can wait. I just had a comment to
7/12.
man, November 12th, which will be a Tuesday.
Everybody's free 7/12?
July, you
Is
still-
is 7/12 fine for the attorneys?
Yes.
So we can do 7/12 here at ALA?
Is that the second Tuesday or the first Tuesday of July?
second.
Second Tuesday?
Yeah, it is, that's your.
No, I can't be here, and she can't be
Can we
here
get 4? We're gonna have to get 4. We just
We
got
have
to.
to
That's
get a day
fine.
where we can get 4.
That's fine.
Can you be the 12th? So we got to at least
I
have
won't.
4.
That's the city's meeting.
I'll be at the city.
Yeah.
So what
Ethics and
about the
accountability.
6th then?
Then we have to go back to the 6th. We can't prolong this.
That's fine.
As a board.
That's fine.
Can we
Well,
go
you-
back to the 6th?
What you saying, Madam
Yeah,
President?
I
you
won't
gotta-
be there, but yeah.
You gotta have 4, you gotta have 4.
Meeting Thursday the 7th or
What about the
Thursday
7th?
14th?
Yeah, 7.
And Linda's not there.
Sis-
But then we
Oh,
have 1, 2, 3.
14th,
Can you be here on the 7th? We'll have 4. If Linda can't be here, we'll have 4.
Could you do Thursday the 7th?
The 14th, but that's so far out.
That's too far out.
That's too far. I think it need to be done earlier in, you know,
Will you
as
be back,
early
Sister
as
Ruth, on the
possible. Yeah, I won't get back until the 11th. I'll be gone from the 6th until the 11th.
Oh,
We still have basically 2 weeks in June here.
Yeah,
Well, the 22nd to the 24th, the superintendent won't be here. Then you got people on vacation that week going into the 4th.
What about the 29th of June?
Well, I won't be here. I'll be leaving out.
Works for me.
well, Madam President, can I ask Lawyer Van Weren, what, so if we take care of it in the month of July somewhere, whether it's the first or the last, what do you
Listen, we
think?
can do it this week.
What do you think? Is that okay,
June
or
22nd?
when?
Laura,
June
I'm
20.
babying my brother.
Oh, okay.
Superintendent's out of town.
And
Okay.
superintendent's out of town. 22, what can we do this week? Is the attorney, what can we do this week?
This week?
we can do those categories.
All we got is the 17th. Because the
you talking about
16th,
date.
we got the Congress, and I missed this morning because I had to take my wife to the doctor, but we got Congress 9 to 1.
Oh, we're talking about in the afternoon. Can we do the?
In the
16th?
afternoon?
Yeah, at 5,
What day?
on the 16th of this week.
Okay. What day, the 16th? Oh, Lord. have
It's on
mercy.
a Thursday. We have the 16th and 17th available of this week.
I'm cutting my grass in the dark now, so I don't know what I'm
Hey, the 16th.
doing, my bushes in the dark.
Can anybody do the 16th?
I can do the 16th.
I can do the 16th.
I'm pretty sure I can.
You can do the
I
16th?
think I got.
Laura.
Okay. Okay.
Pastor Gilbert?
16th is good. That's good.
Ms. McIntyre, can you say?
Sister Laura?
So 6/16, property, I'm asking you guys, what about the attorney?
Yeah,
Can
what
you
about
guys get here 16th of this week?
I
looking
I am
for-
out of town, but
Uh-oh.
we'll have an attorney here if you need us, because categorizing is critical. That's
Right.
the step
Right,
we,
yeah,
that has
that's
to
what
be
we gotta
taken
do.
before we
Yeah.
go
So-
anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we can do it. We can do that.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And Lawyer Clark, he haven't said nothing, so he should be here. No, I'm just teasing.
5:30 or 6:30? 5:30 or 6:30?
Okay, we're looking at 5:30 or
5:30.
6:16.
Yeah.
It shouldn't take us long.
It shouldn't take us that
shouldn't.
long.
No,
to
it ain't
run
gonna take
through.
us
If
that-
everybody just go through it and highlight.
Yeah, review your
and I'm quite
material.
sure.
Yeah, while
So
you at
we're
home.
going to,
Good.
each board member will review the material and come prepared
Right.
for the
Be
Thursday
prepared.
meeting.
Let
Right.
Mr. Jones know what
Okay.
we're doing, and he can look through that.
And when you
as
talk
well.
about review the material, which was given to us tonight and what we had earlier.
Right.
This was given to us tonight, and the material that was given to us tonight that we've already had, it's just a copy of material. that we-
Yes, yes. So at that meeting, we'll have to make a decision. I think there's a few things we might need to make that decision. Number one, I would like to see a map of where all our schools are located, and then they somehow be identified as to whether they're open or closed.
All the schools are closed, abandoned buildings. All these buildings that you have in here are closed, abandoned buildings.
Right, okay. But as we try to decide where schools will be, we talked a little bit, we might want to sell this building and build over here, or whatever it might end up being. But I mean, we're talking the empty lots also in this to sell. So identify the empty lots that we have, the closed schools we have, the open schools we have, so we can see a big picture of it all. And I think also what would help is a sketch of the property itself. Is it a square, a rectangle, an L shape?
I don't
Just-
think, Chris, we need all of that information because the person that's purchasing already know what they're getting. They already been and looked at these sites. These are buildings that have been sitting around for years. This list that we have here is just buildings just been sitting around for years.
Well-
The buyer has already kind of looked at what they want.
So the March 23rd meeting that was interrupted when I was assaulted.
yeah.
We had maps. Can we
we
have,
pull those?
can we bring those maps
Yeah, we
back?
did.
So, I mean, we were in the middle of discussing exactly this information when the whole meeting was derailed. So perhaps we could just have that information.
And have the
We
maps
already
here.
have that information, Chris.
And the superintendent, assistant superintendent would be our best resource because they know which direction the district is going and which way we're going and where those schools possibly could be.
Okay, and I'll just say the reason for the sketch is so if it's, I don't know, 5 acres, 10 or 20, how much of the excess land do we want to keep? And without a sketch, we're just not going to know. We can't just simply say, well, we'll keep 5 acres of it. because-
We're gonna be out of thousands of dollars to do that. It would be just to me, we're talking about thousands of dollars. It would be just to me that you have that list in front of you and you, which I did. I just went around and looked at the schools, but I think inside of our white banner, there's a list of stuff and there, that we have. Not in that one, but we'll have all that information for you. But I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, and I think that can come from the assessor's office. I think most assessors have a sketch of the property?
You know, we pulled what we could from the property tax cards, and generally there is that diagram, so we'll pull those on, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Madam President,
Yes.
could we ask our executive assistant, Sister Monica, if, because I brought the recycled paper back the other day, and it was in there. That map was in there. And I meant to take it out. It was sticking out, and I left it in there,
Is the
so.
big map you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, and I knew, I said, I don't need to get rid of this. And my mind got going, and I was coming over to the ad building. So, Sister Monica, I would need another copy of that. Just thank you. But a nice sketch. It was a good map, though. It was excellent. Because that was the one that we were using that day.
Okay, so we all set our next meeting,
The 16th.
it's on the 16th,
What time? At 5:30?
5:30.
I think you better determine with Chris whether he has the information he needs or not, because he seems,
Did Chris were you able to give Chris the information he needs?
Yeah, I have
Oh,
that book.
okay.
I didn't really see a
What book is
sketch
that?
of it.
This book right here.
Finance, remember, with all.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
See,
I didn't
it
put that
has-
in the shredder system.
It has
Because
maps and,
she told me to keep up with it, because she wasn't gonna make another copy for me.
no, it's quite a bit. So,
Yeah, I got that. I'm good.
you got that book?
Yeah.
So is all minds set and clear?
Yeah,
this
all
is
minds
workshop
are
page.
clear.
Okay,
so I just want to make sure,
okay.
okay, because We have the information. We've had the information. Now we just need to do our due diligence as board members, as individual board members. Okay, and we need to move forward with this. Okay, but you need to read your package and come with the information, with an understanding of the information. We have these experts here, and we don't want to waste their time. And so I just would just like to reiterate, because I know that I'm feeling frustrated, and I can only imagine how you feel. So please, in the interests of professionalism,
Yeah, I agree
please
with that.
do your due diligence and come prepared to the meeting. You have everything you need.
On the 16th, okay. Yes, ma'am. Will do. Seeing no further discussion concerning the workshop, I want to thank you for your time. I will get back with you regarding the community partnership agreement. We won't be taking a motion on anything. We agreed that the meeting is on the 16th, since it's just a workshop. And I would like to make an announcement. The Board of Education will hold a committee of the whole meeting prior to your regular meeting on Wednesday, June the 15th, at 5:30 here at ALA. We all set? All men set? Then I can say this.
I'd just like to make a few remarks very quickly, is that I appreciate your presentation, how clear you made things, and it helped to understand the bigger picture. I can kind of get my arms around it now. But the RFP, do you guys handle that, or, okay, that was it?
Put all the documents together. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that lawyer McKenzie said about that copy, it was something she was going to send to Sister Monica to send to us. What was that? It was, I guess so, yeah. Yeah, I guess. Oh, yeah, okay, I got it. Okay, all right, I got the yellow copy, okay, thank you.
Before we adjourn, we got people in the audience that came in a little late. And if it's okay with the board, if you had any interest in property or concern, I want you to take this time from the public while we have the attorney here. Is there anybody who would like to come to the mic and speak before we adjourn?
Yes, I second that.
She seconded? Thank you. Anybody would like to speak concerning any property? Please come forward and speak your name, your address.
Hello, thank you, everyone. My name is Tony Pachorik. My address is 1122 Berry Avenue, Flint, Michigan, 48507. Thank you for having me at this meeting tonight. I just wanted to say that recently I had the liberty of going over to one of the best schools, I think, in my personal opinion, in this district, Southwestern, and I got to do an indoor air quality test with the EPA there. So most of it's pretty good, but this isn't anything we don't know in the district, but we got a lot of places that could use some repairs and some investment. One of the things I noticed there on Southwestern was that they could use a lot of support towards their roofing. And I say that on the sense that, if we can get this roofing issue upgraded, then we can use
Tony,
our...
did you say roofing? Okay.
Correct,
roofing.
sorry.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yep, a roofing
Yes.
issue, yeah.
Okay, we-
So if we can get our roofing on Southwestern invested, we can also invest that into a community resilience center, because I don't know if you guys noticed this, but we're gonna have a lot of heat coming this summer. We're gonna have 105 on the heat index tomorrow. A lot of people are going to need places where they have a chance to get out of that climate, where they have a chance to cool down. Often schools are those sort of community resource centers. So if we could get that roof investment in, then we could have things like better HVAC, or we could have things like solar on that. So when we do have a storm, we could have community resilience. I just wanted to put that suggestion and thought there and say continue doing the great work, and I would love to speak with you all later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Evans, and my address is 2042 Mayberry, Flint, Michigan, 48503. I'm here on behalf of the Brennan Senior Adult Center on the south side of Flint, right down here on Burr Boulevard. And I'm here because we are establishing a neighborhood strategic plan, and Stewart School is our interest. And so we would like to do a presentation to this committee, if we are afforded the opportunity, so that we can show you what we're discussing with our residents in that particular neighborhood. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and also thank you for your great work.
Thank you. Is there any more? Yes. Oh, one more comment.
Hi, my name is Sandra Jones, and I am the CEO of the Ariel Jones Community Outreach Center on the campus of Greater Holy Temple Church of God in Christ. I stand before you concerning Carpenter Elementary School, and I'd like to know where you stand with that school. There's nothing on the northeast side of Flint for our children whatsoever. Right behind our church is Flint Housing. Behind that is Section 8. Behind that, you have trailer parks. And so I stand before you because I want you to understand. Most people feel that the majority of Flint, 60% of it, is minority. On the northeast side is flip-flopped. The northeast side of Flint is not 60% minority. It's 60% majority, meaning white. And there's nothing for our children, period. Our children are being lost. There's no arts, no fine arts, no athletic facilities for them. Nothing to engage these children whatsoever. I'm asking about Carpenter Elementary School because most of you know that Greater Holy Temple is the help center for the entire city of Flint, along with 2 other churches. But the Ariel Jones Community Outreach, we service about 1,100 households a week. We deliver food to over 1,100. Out of that, you have about 1,000 children. And in the back there, there's about 700 children and toddlers on the northeast side. That's on the east side of 475, from Carpenter Road going back. We want to do something with that school. We want to make a community center or something for these children. Please, let's look at that. We're not financial attorneys, so I'm going to tell you that right now. I heard you say that they have to be financial, but I'm not above going and asking for money. Not when it comes to our kids. And we have not closed our doors, not one day, since the water crisis, not even during the pandemic. You can always depend on us. So I'm asking you to take a chance on the Ariel Jones Community Center that feeds more than 1,100 households in this city alone. And when you look at the number of children, each house has approximately 2 children. Multiply that. And then on the northeast side, think about it. You closed the only school that was over there. During the summer, how do you want to bus our kids everywhere? Some of these parents don't even get up early enough for the children to even catch a bus. When the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan brings out their food, you ought to see it's not parents coming out with the children, it's the children coming out to get the food. Let us be a part and help this community revive that area. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves that you would allow an area not to have a school at all, period. And then no community center whatsoever. I need your help. I'm not blaming you individually, but I'm talking about the school, period. I need your help. I want to do something. No, I'm 74 years old. I don't have children, but I have a heart for them because I'm a grandmother. I'm a sister. I'm an aunt. And I'm a pastor's wife. So I have children that I've seen, and I'm asking you to help me help the community, please. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any comments from the board before we adjourn? Any comments? Yes, Christina?
I'm the chair of our community subcommittee, and I'm all for, trying to tie in things and collaboration and finding some synergies and all that. But I think as we move forward, we need to watch what our mission is. So, and I say this, that I don't know that the district can run a community center. I mean, we're having the trouble running the district right now, a community center or centers. And that's where either working with City Hall or putting that responsibility on the city, on City Hall. I mean, I think their pockets are a little bit deeper than ours, though we get more money than them. The budget's bigger here. But I just think we need to watch what is our role, our mission, and how can we actually help. And, if you help too much, you hurt yourself. But
Oh, we're getting that phone. Seeing there's no other comments, further comments, none? Then we can declare this meeting adjourned, workshop, and we'll be back on the 16th, which is Thursday. And we have information for the attorneys to work with and for the public. Like I said, if you want to do something with a school, put together a proposal and send it to the board, and we'll make sure that the law firms get those proposals. But if you want to do something, you have to send it to the board. The board does not do community centers. But there's nothing wrong with, looking into opportunities. And as we said before, this is kind of informal, so, okay.
So, and people can come to the board meeting on Thursday.
Yes, please do come on
So-
Thursday, bring a little bit of information, and maybe we can be a little bit more formal here, back and forth communication. We want our attorneys. I thank you. You can leave. You're dismissed, as we would call it. And then the public can come back and we have more conversation and give you a little more space and time to answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, hit the gavel. Public to ask question, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Huh, thank you, yes.